On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Ankur Goyal. He is the CEO of Impira. We've got a couple of things we're going to talk about. We are going to focus on how his product is leveraging AI and how it's actually making an impact. We're going to talk about how they're releasing a new feature coming out in a little bit and how COVID has kind of shaped what they see. And I'm definitely just curious to meander through this podcast with him. He's got a fantastic background. Ankur, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. And I know, obviously, I did not do justice to your background in any way, shape, or form. So can you maybe let the audience know, who you are and a little bit about your company as well?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for having me. I won't bore you with too many details, but I'm a technology nerd. And before this, used to run the engineering team at a company called MemSQL, which is a relational database company. And what we saw there and what we really helped companies with as well is, businesses have gotten increasingly reliant on data and the impact that data can have on their ability to understand the present and predict the future. But data is really hard to use unless it's formatted in a way that fits into the data ecosystem, specifically things like databases where you can run SQL queries or spreadsheets where you can write, formulas in Excel or Google Sheets. And anytime we talk to a customer and data didn't fit into a format that an existing tool knew how to use, it was really hard for them to leverage that information, especially things like images and documents, which have really valuable data for a business, but are incredibly underutilized in most businesses. And while observing, that problem, in parallel, the sort of machine learning and computer vision world started to wake up. And even though the techniques aren't perfect, and unlike other disciplines, they're statistical and sometimes wrong, now the kind of information you can derive from an image or a document or a video or even an audio file is so much richer than what you could 10 years ago. And so the idea behind Impira was to leverage, this huge step forward in AI, especially, in computer vision, to help businesses leverage incredibly valuable data that today, for the most part, is trapped in files like images and documents. And not only do we help reduce the burden of things like data entry, but what's exciting is the impact we've had on people's morale inside of the companies that we work with, and even their ability to build new products and services and ideas that they could have never, thought of without technology like ours. And so, it goes without saying that we've been able to have a pretty significant multi-million-dollar impact for the customers that we work with. And we've also, had the pleasure of working with some incredible customers like Stitch Fix, Airbnb, and Colgate, and many others. And so that's a little bit about myself and the business.
Awesome. When I reached out and I saw what the company was doing, I found it really interesting because I way back when I worked for a company called Endeca,
Oh yeah.
and so unstructured data, the competitor was fast, and I loved the space, and I thought it was an interesting problem. We were just dealing with unstructured data, and that was really complicated. I remember Skechers was a client at the time, and they were just trying to come up with a way to pull out the right metadata from the information to just have a tree structure on the website, and that was weeks. So something like what you guys are doing, where computer vision's involved, you guys are looking at documents. What were some of the particular challenges? Like when you decide to tackle this space, you saw the opportunity. Was computer vision the biggest component, or was there something else that you saw as the biggest hurdle to kind of getting the product off the ground?
No, that's a great question. I think there are kind of three big technical challenges or product challenges to overcome. And the product and technology that we're building as a result is pretty ambitious and requires some ultra creative and hardworking people that I have the pleasure of working with today. But one big category of problem, of course, is the machine learning and computer vision problem. For the most part, outside of companies like Google and Facebook, and I'd say outside of consumer applications, computer vision is very nascent. There's a lot of research and a lot of activity and interest, but it's not in production in a lot of places. So, taking what we know works off the shelf or what we expect to work off the shelf and actually making that work in a way that supports what customers are trying to do is really challenging. And in machine learning, I think one of the hardest things is actually framing the business problem in terms of what machine learning software can responsibly solve. And so, any sort of out of the off the shelf computer vision type algorithm as framed, the problem that it's solving might be different than what a business is trying to solve. For example, the problem of extracting a total out of an invoice is a bit different than the problem of extracting a set of line items. And knowing that information, you can use the sort of underlying assumptions to develop an algorithm or even inform an algorithm how to best perform the task. So there's a lot of challenge there. Now, once you solve or at least make some progress on those challenges, the next thing you have to think about is the user experience. Most of our customers are business users at companies who have a lot of subject matter expertise in areas like marketing consumer products through retailers like Walmart, or calculating the risk associated with a business based on the documents that describe, its sort of inputs and outputs. So these are really smart, creative people. They really understand certain tools like Excel really, really well. Some of them really understand database technology and API technology really well, but they're not machine learning experts. And so you have to think a lot about the user experience. And that's a really hard problem too. You know, Guiding a user through essentially training a machine learning model that works on their data set in a way that doesn't frustrate them and understand the things that they're accomplishing, and also gives them the enthusiasm to overcome the limitations of a machine learning model. That's a pretty hard challenge as well. And so we think a lot about how to take familiar experiences from products like Excel and Finder and Google Photos and other things that we draw inspiration from, and marry those with kind of the unfamiliar aspects of machine learning and training and stuff that you sort of have to experience to some extent to be able to use the software. And then if you make some progress there, what you're left with is a huge infrastructure challenge. My background working on relational databases, the types of data and the types of queries that relational databases are designed to operate on is very different than the information and the types of things that we're trying to compute in the machine learning world. For example, in machine learning, to derive something about an individual document, you need to take into account all the other documents that might be similar to some extent and use kind of a shared pool of information. That's very different than how an index works in an Endeca or a SQL database, which is a kind of a much simpler data structure. And so we've had to do a lot of hardcore database systems building type of stuff, including investing in compiler technology and storage technology that makes all of this possible.
How much relation? So obviously, you guys are, when I was looking at the website, you guys extract data from different types of objects. So obviously, I know, OCR is one tool set. You guys have machine learning models to look at the other. Was there any efficiencies gained with these different objects in terms of a common approach to how you're looking to tackle these? Because obviously, you have, video, photos, documents. I mean, to me, it sounds like it's a lot of work to get each machine to operate as effectively as it can.
Yeah, I think what's neat is that the user experience and the infrastructure for the basic flow of workload that we support, which is, you take a bag of bytes and dump it into our system, and we can help you, what we would say, incrementally structure it into usable data. The user experience and the infrastructure part of it is pretty common across all of these different data types. And in fact, one really specific example, a lot of documents share the same file formats as images, which may be used for a different purpose. So PNG file might be a scanned document, or a digital asset, or a driver's license, right? And the ability to take that PNG file and figure out what the text is and where the text is, and compress it in different sizes so that we can show it in our UI efficiently and store it somewhere that we can retrieve it efficiently and keep track of some metadata about it. That's common regardless of how you want to use, the PNG file. The machine learning models themselves are different across the different domains that we operate on. There's some overlap. Like, if you take, for example, a digital asset, there generally is some text on them as well. And, the same OCR model that can look at a document and figure out that this is someone's name can, look at a digital asset and figure out the name as well. But, I think our view of the world is that, our user experience and our infrastructure enable a dramatically different workflow and product experience for our customers. And there are a lot of different machine learning enabled applications that result from that. And we specialize in a few just to illustrate, the breadth of what we can do. But we also think that over time, we're going to engage more and more third parties and even our customers to fill in some of the machine learning gaps that maybe we don't address natively out of the box.
Interesting. So to touch on something you mentioned about, having a user that obviously is familiar with Excel and having them be able to train the model, how much data typically, like when somebody's implementing the product, they have it in-house, they're using it, how much data do they need to feed into the model for them to see the results that you guys are targeting?
That's a great question. I will give you the CEO answer in a second, but our CTO, Richard, would be very upset if I didn't remind the disclaimer that it depends on the problem, it depends on the data, it depends on a lot of different things to have kind of an exact answer. That said, generally, if you're working with relatively low complexity document data like invoices, purchase orders, bills of lading, driver's licenses, medical records, as few as one or even two samples or labeled samples are enough to be able to extract meaningful information out. So if you think about invoices as an example, if all of your invoices are from the same vendor, then with one example, our system can learn how to extract all of the relevant fields. If they're from multiple vendors, maybe it requires one if they all use the word total because that's one of the signals that we can kind of read into. But if they're dramatically different, then we require a bit more. And that's actually one of the sort of most interesting parts of the software is kind of the way that we help and guide users to give us the minimum amount of information that we might need to be able to do robust statistical inference.
It's interesting. I was talking to somebody who runs a construction company. They've implemented Salesforce. And he said, basically, we treat it like a Rolodex. And I was like, well, aren't you guys going to become more, electronic? And he was like, no, we still have stacks and stacks of files. And I knew you were coming on. I was just thinking about the problem in the space. And I'm like, well, lots of companies are still going down the electronic path and whatnot. You have users still with stacks and stacks of forms that will probably never go away. And to have a one document similar invoice and all of a sudden it's electronic without them doing anything seems like seems pretty amazing.
That's maybe one of my favorite things about the company is just having the opportunity nowadays on Zoom to see the impact that software like this can have on people's day-to-day lives. It's really exciting. And I think you mentioned a little bit about COVID earlier. There are a lot of customers that we work with now are being forced to move from paper to digital for the first time, and they're disoriented, and a lot of things that are you know not automated but still really fast to do with a piece of paper because as a human it's easier to work with paper than it is to do exactly the same task on a computer are suddenly much harder for people than they were before. And we've had the opportunity to help some customers who are now they have digital invoices for the first time ever. To sort through the mess of those has been pretty exciting and interesting.
I think it sounds like a compelling product. Like when you look at AI and you look at the ROI, it seems like a no-brainer. But what are people seeing in terms of implementing the product and the return on bringing in something like this to solve a move to electronic format?
Yeah, so we've helped large enterprise customers, like Colgate, Stitch Fix, and Airbnb, save millions and millions of dollars, and actually, make quite a bit of progress on new initiatives that they've been pushing as well. The ROI can be really straightforward. So, Airbnb shared a nice quote with us about how they went from working with 500 images a day in a very manual way to being able to now work with 5,000 in a completely automated way, right? And the ROI there is extremely straightforward. The talented team of folks that we work with at Airbnb has gone from labeling things one at a time to now teaching our system how to automate a bunch of those things, for them. And they get more time back in their day to be creative, which saves them money, but, helps them do the thing that they were hired to do in the first place and also think about other things they can do to sort of further their business. In some cases, the ROI is much, beyond that as well. So if you think about a company like Colgate, where we've been able to help is really minimizing the number of moving parts and time required for them to take a product and go to market with it. And so, I think ROI in automation is, depending on the use case, can be time saved, but also a level of scale that wasn't possible before, which, can help you take things to the market faster. It can help you create more data that allows you to do more things than you could before as well. And so it's been interesting. Although I would say, and maybe we can talk about this too, in general with AI, thinking about getting an AI workload into production and actually evaluating the net ROI is a huge challenge for the industry.
I've had this conversation, and I think a lot of times, depending on what AI products being implemented, it's the first time for most organizations. I think for Impira, it seems very tangible. We're talking about the process. You can feel the time savings. But a lot of other AI component, models or businesses you're looking at, they're projects that a company might not be able to see quite as clearly or distinctly. And all of a sudden now they're trying to rationalize what that expense is to the benefit. And I think again, I think it's a different product based on the use case, but I think that is a challenge, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Our view is we like to give customers an opportunity to start small and see some tangible value and experience what the workflow of integrating AI software is into their lives and into their world. It feels different once they start small and they start to see, oh, okay, like these kinds of things work really well. I tried throwing these images into it and I didn't get the thing that I was hoping for. Let me ask Impira why. Oh, okay. I actually, those kinds of problems don't work yet. Like, it's computers with 3 data points can't figure out the SKU number of product that someone is wearing without any other reference information.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was actually just thinking about a side benefit that I hadn't really thought about, but I was just thinking through workflow. And if I'm a company that has a bunch of documents, I was thinking about security, right? So documents, a file cabinet, an office can only be so secure. People can glance on to documents or whatnot, but actually moving it to digital, and I'm sure, you guys probably have security solved from the infrastructure perspective. Is security an actual benefit that you guys are hearing about from clients?
Absolutely. I think security beyond restricting access and sort of preventing leaks or whatever might be the benefit of that actually can provide a lot of value in helping people get to focus on what they need to focus on. If you open a filing cabinet and you look at what's in a filing cabinet, you might be overwhelmed by a bunch of files that have nothing to do with you. But what we've seen is that we've made it really easy for users at global, massive scale of an enterprise, and even in a small company. I think this problem exists too, to just log into the product and see the things that are sort of relevant to them to get their job done.
I think when you start looking at the impact that digitizing has, I think it's kind of multifaceted. And I think, like you mentioned, the workflow process and the security becomes compelling. I know you mentioned obviously COVID, and I know businesses are looking to take advantage of the opportunity and different angles. How are you guys seeing COVID as, a potential area opportunity, potential for growth? Is there anything that's happening in your world that's coming to fruition?
Yeah, I think there are probably 3 things that we think about. The first is just secular industry trends. We have a lot of customers that are in the e-commerce space, and we've had a pretty nice kind of backseat view into how that's impacted their business, and obviously a number of them are doing exceptionally well as a result of the accelerated transformation of COVID on commerce. And so, that's been a tailwind for us. Our customers have been doing really well, and it's helped companies that are not our customers yet start to experience some of the challenges of scale that necessitate using a product like ours. The second thing that we think a lot about is just in general the acceleration of digital transformation. And it's forced for a lot of businesses now. We talked about filing cabinets having to be digital a moment ago, but suddenly, every person in every organization has a digital footprint that they have to use to sort of commute to work and communicate with each other and get their job done. And so we think that our product and we've seen our product impact the digital transformation of our customers. We think that digital transformation, and lastly, we think about the impact that COVID has on our own business, and looking internally what we can do to best support our employees and our customers and future customers through the process. And I think the big thing that we've noticed is that for us, a lot of the customer relationships that we built were done in person before. And that's obviously not the same as it was in the past. And so we've kind of used this moment in time to invest really significantly in making our product a self-service product. And so at the beginning of COVID, if you wanted to experience Impira or learn about it, you went to our website and you hit request a demo. Now you can go to our website, type in your email address and start using the product, within 30 seconds and start experiencing it. And that investment has been largely influenced and prioritized and acted upon so that we can best operate through the kind of the new world.
That sounds like you guys are certainly taking advantage of the dynamics. What's coming up on the roadmap? I guess Impira, I mean, the product sounds like it's just evolving with just the ability to self-demo. What else is coming down the pike that you guys are working on?
Yeah, so what we're shipping publicly in October is really exciting because it's the first GA level release of self-service functionality. And in that is, I think, the sort of killer feature is the ability to extract information out of any kind of document directly in the UI. And so while a number of products come kind of pre-cooked for invoices or pre-cooked for bills of lading or for purchase orders or medical records or contracts or something else, our product allows you to work with a wide variety of documents that we don't need to know anything about in advance of you using the product. And that's kind of the big feature that we've been working on for a while and are really excited to make publicly available this month. Beyond that, the other kind of really big investment that we've made is in making the process of working with structured data a lot richer and more powerful. And so, this comes in two forms. One, you might extract structured information out of your document. So you might start with a bunch of invoices and, get a total and due date and payment terms and all kinds of stuff out of them. But then what do you do with that information? Well, before, in Impira, you could export that stuff as a spreadsheet or export it through an API, and you could use it to find documents or files that are relevant to something that you're doing. But what we found quite often is that people actually wanted to join it with other information, maybe ERP data if you're dealing with a bunch of invoices, or product data if you're dealing with a bunch of images, and actually play with it in our product. And so we've been building a lot of technology that actually allows people to run queries and slice and dice and play with data directly in our product. And so that's kind of the other big feature that's landing in this release. And we have a lot of work cut out for us ahead of that, both in making our machine learning technology work better with more documents and more scale and more file types and more things that you might want to get out of them. And also in making the process of working with data in our platform kind of more powerful.
Yeah, I'd imagine just the data that's, the information that's being digitized in these forms and other documents probably represents a massive repository of information that's never been looked at, analyzed, viewed in terms of what they can determine, aside from manual data entry, which is probably the slowest form you could ask. But sounds phenomenal what you guys are doing.
It's a lot of fun. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. What we get excited about is this kind of moment of nirvana with our customers where they take some minimum viable amount of information and load it into our product and join everything up together. And suddenly they have this insight machine that they didn't have before. And, there's some usually very specific thing that they want to do, like reconciling inventory across bills of lading and purchase orders and invoices was a completely manual process. Yeah, that sucks. They dump all these documents into a product, set up a reconciliation report, and for the first time ever, it's automated, and now they can kind of stop doing that. And what we get excited about is, they start thinking about the next thing they can do and the next thing they can do and the next person or their colleague that they can get into the system to automate more. And they load enough data into the system that they build a pretty good representation of their business in the product. And the value kind of starts to compound from there.
Very cool. I think it sounds like this new release is going to definitely broaden the audience and especially the data capabilities. I think it's going to obviously be a big boom for the product. I appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing a little bit about the product, the industry, and problems that you're solving. It's been really interesting talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If someone wants to reach out to you, is LinkedIn a good avenue? Twitter? Is there any preferred avenue for somebody to reach out with follow-up questions?
Definitely. I'm present on LinkedIn and Twitter. And you can also just email me. It's my first name, Ankur at Impira, Impira.com.
All right. Awesome. We'll include all that in the show notes. Again, thank you for being on. And that's it for this week. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week with a different guest, different topic, business problems we're looking at solving. In the meantime, please subscribe to the podcast. That's the only way the podcast can grow. Feedback is awesome. Any topics you want us to tackle, any questions that you have for future guests, please provide those. Always looking for more information. Until next week. Thanks.